YouTube.
Okay.
This is Senate Judiciary, Thursday, September 24th, 2020. Again, meeting remotely. Today is S24, a courthouse name for Judge Francis McCaffrey, whom we've all had a great deal of respect for. But evidently, the courthouse was named in a prior bill, and so S24 became a vehicle for corrections racial equity bill. And we're looking at that as the committee with the responsibility for corrections policy. I want to start out, though, this morning by thanking Peggy Delaney, particularly from the Legislative Council staff, our committee assistant, who is in charge of all the committee assistants and has done just a terrific job of organizing throughout this pandemic. We started in mid-March, meeting remotely, and it would not have been possible to even begin to think about meeting without her and other members of that team, particularly Mike Farrant. So a special thanks, Peggy, to you and to Mike Farrant and all the members of your team for all the help in getting us through this. Really do appreciate it. And I hope you have a good rest of the fall and that you'll be back and raring to go, hopefully in person in January, but time will tell.
Thank you, Senator Sears. And it's, again, I'll say it again, it's my honor and privilege.
Thank you. We're going to start out. Jim Baker has an appointment at 10:30, so
Senator Sears,
yes.
I don't know if it's my computer or not, but you are very, very scratchy.
Well, unfortunately, I'm outside, and that might be why.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to turn off I will turn off my audio and just turn it over to Jim Baker.
It's fine now, Dick, for some reason.
Okay. All right. Okay. Maybe it's this thing here.
I think that's what it is, actually.
How's that?
That's good.
Great. All right. Why don't we start with Jim Baker, who has an appointment at 10:30, and then we'll kind of move along to others.
Yeah, good morning, folks. Thank you, Senator Sears. For the record, I'm Jim Baker, the interim commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections. And I'm here to talk about the Department of Corrections Racial Equity and Bias Plan and Report. First, I want to say that we fully support the work that was done in House Corrections and Institutions. In fact, I'm sure Representative Edmonds and Shaw will tell you that we work very closely with them on this language. From where I sit, I talked to this committee and other committees in the legislature about where I see us as an organization and the work that we need to do, and equity is a huge part of that. And for me, it's just not equity about our inmate population or those we supervise in the community. It's also equity for our employees, and with a heavy emphasis on the way we hire, train, promote, and create the environment amongst the workforce that we think is the most effective way for us to carry out our mission. So I really don't have a whole bunch to add to. We support this language. We were part of creating the language, and we see an opportunity here for us to generate a document that will be a blueprint for us that fits into the bigger conversation about equity in the state, but really hones in on areas where we can do work that create a more equitable, fair, and impartial system of corrections in the state of Vermont. So that's what I have to say about the language in the legislation.
Okay. Any
Matt.
Senator White?
So Commissioner Baker, I applaud your efforts for going forward with this, but I guess my question is, why would you think you need legislation in order to do this? Because we have an Office of Racial Equity, and Executive Director Susanna Davis has been charged with looking at systemic racism throughout the state. And so I'm curious why you think you need legislation to do this.
Because I think it makes a bold statement to the Department of Corrections about the importance of this. I can say it, but on commissioners, and maybe even in my case, even more, commissioners are only here for a short period of time, Senator. We're talking about a radical cultural change inside corrections. This is just one small piece of that. And I think I'm normally not a big supporter of legislative reports, as some of you may know from my history of being around the legislature. But I think in this case, it forces corrections to take a serious internal look at its operation and create a document that goes, it's not something we're competing with Director Davis. It goes hand in hand with the work that she's doing. But it's very specific to corrections and forces us to take a serious look internally. Now I'm serious about it, but I've got 1,100 employees, and some of them may not be serious about it. So this, to me, is a bold statement about we're taking a look at this, directed from oversight committees from the legislature, and that's the reason why when Representative Edmonds spoke to me about this, that I was supportive of it.
Senator Benning.
So Commissioner, I want to, first, I'm still scratching my head as to how you're an interim and still here. More power to you. But not only as a member of this committee, but as a member of institutions, I know you've been placed under a tremendous amount of pressure from the get-go. And we may not have the opportunity to express publicly our appreciation after today. Your words are reminding me of a bill that we worked on yesterday, and I hope that there is an attitude amongst law enforcement that will eventually come around to the position you've just expressed. I want to say personally, I think you've done a heck of a great job with the Corrections Department in the time that you've had to work with. And hopefully whoever your replacement ends up being, should you ever decide to not become an interim anymore, there's a job opening apparently after your interimship is over. But I do want to say I appreciate the work you've done throughout the past few months. It's been one heck of a ride, and to watch you do that has been very interesting and informative. So thanks.
Sir, I appreciate those kind words. What I will tell you is that there are a lot of folks inside corrections that were waiting for an opportunity to let the reins be taken down and let them do their work. And that's what's happening right now. And this equity piece is an example of this. People inside corrections were waiting for the opportunity to be able to have this conversation. And I'm just allowing them to have the conversation. That's my role. What I will tell you, the same thing I told us, I do a statewide teleconference every Wednesday afternoon. Anybody in the department can get on. It's an open question directed at me. I usually give them a little bit of an overview of what's going on in the department every week. Yesterday, we spent time talking about Justice Ginsburg and the impact of leadership and how that can impact corrections. I only tell you that because it ties directly into equity and the legacy that Justice Ginsburg left behind around gender. And so I appreciate those kind words, but this is what I told the staff yesterday. I've told Secretary Smith that I'm here as long as he needs me and as long as my health holds up.
I think every member of this committee would echo Senator Benning's remarks of our
Yes.
appreciation for the job you've done in probably the most difficult, challenging times in 100 years.
Absolutely.
Going through and dealing with the pandemic and what we've seen nationally in prisons particularly, and the results in Vermont prisons of the COVID. Unfortunately, we saw the national trend with our offenders that are housed in Mississippi. But I also want to thank you, Jim, for all the work you've done and the professionalism that with which you approach this job. And I will tell you that you've been there longer than many commissioners who were hired in the past. And so
I don't know, Senator, I don't know if that's good or bad, or I'm just
I don't know either.
foolish enough.
I remember when when I first started, and you may remember this, Commissioner, I think it was when you first started in the state police, he immediately announced to Dick Snelling that he needed a helicopter to visit all the correctional facilities. I think he got fired within a week of his time on the
Well,
job.
I haven't asked for a helicopter, Senator, so I guess I'm okay.
I think
Listen, I appreciate all your kind words.
Yeah.
You know, I just think public service is important, and that's why I do what I do. And I appreciate these kind words.
Have you had an opportunity to see Senator Ash's proposed amendment to the bill? It's posted on our website, and it talks about working with the Commissioner of Corrections, working with the Executive Director of Racial Equity on a strategy and long-term plan to address systematic racism, bias, diversity, and inclusion in the Department of Corrections.
Yes.
Rather than having the department doing it, as I think, and I don't know if that was the intent, we'll get from Representative Evans and Representative Shar in a moment, but Senator Ash went and redrafted the House version. So I don't know if you have any comments on Senator Ash's version.
I really don't. I think if I read it right, and what I'm hearing you say is Senator Ash's intent was to make sure that we were working in concert with Director Davis, and we are. And I think she would. I know she's on. I've had a couple of conversations with her. I know other staff members talked to her. And our work, I see aligning with the work that she is tasked with doing, and she's doing. So I don't, what I would not want is for us to get away from following the intent and the plan that's in the language that House Corrections Institution put forward. Because I'll say the same thing again that I said in response to Senator White's question. A bold statement helps me in a leadership role to carry on this work inside corrections. And we are now really starting to get into the data collection to understand who we have in our system and how. I mean, we're nowhere near where we need to be. But you know, I'll give an example of this. The data showed in the month of July that 2 of the 13 individuals who are transgendered in our system were put in segregation. And without that kind of data, you don't see that. And so when you have 13 individuals in a protected class and 2 of them end up in segregation, I have a saying that's enough to put your coffee cup down and ask why. So what I'm saying is I would not want us to move away from us focusing directly on corrections, but working in concert with Director Davis.
Senator Sears?
Senator White, yes, Senator White.
So the reason I asked that question, Commissioner, is because we have, the legislation has permanently charged the executive director of racial equity to and that office to look at systemic racism across state government. And behind that is the force of the governor and all of the governor's staff, which means all the commissioners and all the secretaries. So it is a statement in itself saying this is really important, and the legislature has said it's important, and the governor has said it's important. And what I fear is that if we go down this path, every agency or every office or every division or every department will come to the legislature and say, we need legislation in order to look at this in our agency, because our agency is somehow special. So I don't know how many agencies, departments, and offices and divisions we have, but I would hate to see us try to write legislation around each of those to try to put the force of legislation behind it, when I think we already have done that through creating the office and the panel, and the governor by implementing that office and hiring Ms. Davis. So that's my fear, is that I think that we could go down this path next year with every other agency and every other department and every division and every office. So that's my fear.
I appreciate that, and I hear what you're saying, Senator. I guess my only comment on it is that, I guess every commissioner thinks their agency is special. I don't think that way, but I do know that we have a very direct impact on the lives of individuals and their ability to live lives that, we have the ability, and I just gave the example. We have the ability to interrupt people's lives in a way that a lot of other agencies don't. And so all I'm trying to do, and part of my conversation was with Representative Emmons and Representative Shaw, and then with their committee, was to make sure that people know that corrections is taking this seriously. We were working on it anyway, but this just gives out some clarity and guidance to us on what we need to do to report back to the legislature. So I appreciate your comments. It's not meant to be a pushback.
Yeah, I want to just suggest that I do agree that it's helpful to have this in statute. So it's a slight disagreement with Senator White. The reason being, this is if not the largest group of state employees, next to largest group of state employees work for the Department of Corrections. And we also have a lot of contractors and volunteers who work with the Department of Corrections. So I see this as somewhat different, but I thought what was lacking in the bill that came over, and I agree with Senator Rash, that we need to involve the Director of Racial Equity into this process. And so but I do think I do applaud the House and Jim. I don't know who went first, but for raising this issue and putting it onto the McCaffrey building bill. So I'm a little bit at odds here on this one, but I do see corrections as somewhat of a unique office of state government in that they have so many employees and they have up to 6,000 people under their supervision who have to do what we hope they do what they're told to do, and what they're being told to do is done without prejudice. And I think I find that unique to perhaps the Agency of Natural Resources, which also could use help in making sure that they respond in a diverse way. But when you think about the number of people under corrections control and the number of employees in the department, I hate to disagree with my good friend from Wyndham from the other side of the mountain. But,
I
that's
think we've
fine.
had many disagreements in the past and probably
I think
will
we have,
continue to, but I just do want to acknowledge that corrections is in a slightly different situation, but there are other agencies in the state that also have a huge impact on people's lives. All of the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Health, DEVA, anybody that deals with any economic services issues. If we see systemic racism in those areas, it does have a huge impact on the lives of the people that they serve. So while corrections does have a lot of people that are in their control, the other agencies also make a huge impact on people's lives. But I'm not gonna, if we want this in legislation, and I hope that this is in session law, not in the green books.
I believe it's session, but Becky Wasserman can help us with that.
It's session law.
Are there any other questions for Commissioner Baker before he has to leave us? And I believe Heather Simmons is here and will be available.
She is here, Senator. She'll be able to follow up. And Heather does have the point inside corrections on the discussion and the work around equity.
Thank you. All right. So I believe my agenda is on my iPad, and my iPad just shut itself down for good reason, probably. I didn't want to be up anymore. Oh gosh. Back to the agenda. I'm sorry, folks. Rebecca Wasserman was scheduled next, but I think maybe given the conversation, I'm going to jump to Representative Emmons, and if she wants, Representative Shaw, the Vice Chair of the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, my name is Representative Alice Emmons, Chair of the House Corrections and Institutions, and I have with me, as you stated, the Vice Chair, Representative Shaw. And so I think together we can sort of give you our thoughts and maybe quickly walk you through the language. We, starting last January, which was a long time ago, we spent quite a bit of time with DOC, particularly with Heather Simons, as well as with Commissioner Baker, as a result of what was reported in the Chittenden Correctional Facility and the issues there. And it really came to light that there's some real culture issues within DOC that need to be addressed, and the current commissioner is doing the work to do that. When we started talking over the summer on the whole racial equity and social equity issue, a lot of folks do not look at Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections, people don't focus on it. The public doesn't really focus on it until a big issue comes up, and then everybody's saying, why did they do this? So the concern was that at any point in time, we have anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 Vermonters under the custody of the Department of Corrections. And of those, it ranges anywhere from 1,600 to 1,800 folks who are physically incarcerated, and their movements are limited. We also have folks out in the community who are supervised by our field service offices. And in testimony, we really want to make sure that we really work with the commissioner in changing the culture within DOC, the culture of employee to employee relationships, employee to offender relationships, offender to offender, and offender to staff. And this is what the language attempts to address. It doesn't point fingers at anyone. And we start out with the findings section to be really clear what is in current statute, is that the Department of Corrections is not a law enforcement entity. It is structurally within the Agency of Human Services for a reason. Other states, the Department of Corrections is within their Department of Public Safety. And we in Vermont years ago made the decision that DOC should be within the Agency of Human Services because it's part of people's lives. So the first part of the finding is that, and we cited the statute 28 VSA section 1, which is for the rehabilitative correctional programming. And we stated as well that it's to render treatment to offenders with the goal of achieving their successful return and participation as citizens to the state and to foster their human dignity. The second finding to me, and I think to our committee, was really important because Director Simons actually said this. And we thought it was really important to put these words down in our findings. The DOC does not serve as a law enforcement. That's what we put in. But she said, but does play an important role in implementing the quality of an individual's sentence and ability for the successful return to and participation in the community. That is DOC's role. And we felt that was very important to highlight those words. And as part of that, we feel that part of their role is to provide security and ensure racial and social justice to the employees and to the folks who are under the custody. And then the intent is that we would start addressing the systemic racism and bias to achieve racial and social equity with the employees as well as with the offenders. And we're talking folks who are incarcerated and folks who are out in the field under supervision of our field service offices. And we're also looking at trying to look at the recruiting and training and retention of a diverse and highly quality workforce. And the commissioner is really working now to start working in the training and recruitment of correctional officers and staff. And we want to give support to that. And then we've asked for a plan to come back, and we've laid out what some of the scope of that plan is, that it would address some of the department's employment practices and supervision of the folks under their custody, and that they need to include a timeline and a process for that. And they need to evaluate the hiring practices, the training, the supervision, and competency standards to inform the performance evaluations and promotions of employees, and identify the resources and funding that would be needed. And also to identify a list of stakeholders, because we want to make sure this is inclusive. This is inclusive of the stakeholders. And we had testimony from Director Davis. We reached out to Tabitha Moore. We had VSCA in. We had Director Simons in. We've been reaching out, and we would have done more if we'd had the time, but we want to make sure that the stakeholders are at the table. And then we're asking for a report back to our committee and your committee by the 15th of January, because we need to do a lot more work on this. So this plan would be a work in progress so that we continue doing deeper work in it next session. So that's our goal. That's what the language before you does. And I don't know if Representative Shaw would like to speak in. He was the reporter of the bill. So,
Representative Shaw, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Senator, and members of the committee for having us in today. I think Chair Emmons did a marvelous job of reporting out what is in the bill. I'd like to give you my personal observation just a little bit, why I got excited about this bill. S338 was the start of a really good move into doing better within our corrections department, in our corrections population. As we talked along S338, we set up a series of reports in that bill to report back to the General Assembly. However, after S338 went out and listening, and I got really interested in Commissioner Baker's interest in doing a better job of hiring and training the people within the Department of Corrections. And then he set up the Office of Professional Standards within DOC. And as we know, Heather Simonson is now the director of that. And to back up the chair's testimony, we've had Heather in a lot, but when she came in after she was appointed the director of the Professional Standards Office, she really began to talk to us about the people, recruiting, training, and retention of folks within corrections. And that is a big deal. We all know that corrections is short employees. So training the right people to be members of their team is important. And that all involves into why I'm here today, is to talk about why we need this bill. We heard from Heather about not only employee versus inmate incidences with not being racially equitable and so forth. We also heard about employee versus employee, and we don't think about that very much in our world. We think everybody's okay. And we also heard about prisoner versus prisoner and prisoner versus employee. So it's a systemic issue throughout corrections. And again, to back up Chair Emmons, these folks that are incarcerated are certainly invulnerable because they're locked up. And so it's a little different animal than being on the street. However, we've also heard reports of the latest down in the Brattleboro area of a DOC employee taking advantage of a person under his control when they were under supervision and not locked up. So this is a serious issue for me personally, and for the committee, that we really take a kind of a dive into what's going on. And it's important to understand that we may not have scooped in corrections in some of the work that we've done in other bills throughout this session, because they are not law enforcement. They're not classified as law enforcement. They're employees of the State Department of Human Services. So that is a little different. And the language, Becky will certainly go over the language with you, but I think what this bill does is kicks off a concrete plan for corrections to take a deep look at themselves with the help of Susanna Davis and her team in the administration, and with the help of DOC working in concert with them to get back to us and tell us how they can do better, or how they think they can do better, or if they can help us understand how we can help them do better. And there is a section in the report that asks them to tell us, what do you need for resources? We don't want to just pile more on the DOC and let them try to do this work within their existing resources. And it's important for us to help them do this. So I guess that's my, excuse me. Okay, that's my spiel, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Butch. Senator White.
So I seem to be, it's a good thing the end of the session is coming up, because I seem to be a little testy lately, as my committee members will tell you, but I appreciate what you've both said. And when I read this and when I listen to it, most of it is aimed at the people in the system, the staff, the prisoners, the relationships between them, and how we do that. I would hope that, and I'm sure Susanna will do this, but I would hope that we are not just looking at the people and how we respond and how we train them, because systemic racism comes from systems that are put in place that impact people. And surely there are, and I have to admit that I don't have any idea what those systems are that might be impacting, but they might be systems of how we allow worship services, or they might be systems of in the field, how we, I don't know what those systems are, but what I'm saying is that this bill seems to be focused mainly on the personnel and on the interrelationships between people who are part of the system in any way. And I know Susanna is on the call with us here, and so I'm appealing to her to go in this study and in this work, go way beyond just those personnels, but look at the potential systems that cause discrimination here, both around racial injustice and socioeconomic injustice, and what our systems are, and come up with some solutions to that. So thank you.
Can I respond to that in terms of the
If you
language?
just give me 20 seconds to,
Mhm.
Peggy, would you send Senator Ash a Zoom link to this meeting? Thank you. Go ahead, Alice.
So I really appreciate what Senator says. And we talked about that in the committee, and we talked about that with the folks who were testifying, and particularly with DOC. DOC, their systems are in their directives and their policies. And we addressed this in the plan, that they would develop a strategy and a long-term plan to address systemic racism, bias, diversity, and inclusion in DOC. And the scope of that plan would address employment practices and supervision of persons under the custody of the commissioner in state facilities and in the community. Supervision of persons, DOC does that through their directives and policies. And that's where you need to do that really deep dive in terms of the equity issue and the systemic issues of racism, is in their directives and policies. And that is going to take a year or two to really work through that, because a lot of those directives are really outdated, number one. And a lot of them, you do not look at them through the lens of racial equity. And that's what we're asking them to do. That's where your systems, that's where you change your systemic racism within DOC, is through their directives and policies.
What I would like to do is, if possible, is hear from Rosanna Davis. And then Senator Ash has joined us. And thank you, Senator.
All right.
Morning.
Buenos dias, everyone. Good morning. So I've been listening to this conversation with deep appreciation for all the thought that you all are putting into this, and just wanted to very briefly address a few of the remarks that I've heard so far. The point that Senator White made, that this work is already rolled into my mandate as dictated in Act 9 of 2018, that is correct. Effectively, us passing this law would be saying, Susanna, do your job. But it would be saying, do it a little bit faster, because this particular bill does put a deadline for the presentation of this plan. That deadline would be January 15th of 2021. So being that this is already part of my work for all the agencies, effectively what this bill does is tells me to prioritize DOC and do that one first so that it's ready in time for January. To Rep. Shaw's point about our mention of my team, I just have to say there is no team, you're looking at it. So, which is exactly the reason that this plan doesn't already exist for this agency and for a number of other agencies, because it is slow work when it is one person doing the work. So I do just want to acknowledge that, yes, this is going to happen. This is part of my work, and it's something that would be done whether or not this legislation were to come into play. This particular bill does put that time limit on it, so it accelerates the process for DOC as opposed to other agencies. But I hope that there's some comfort to you all in knowing that whether this bill moves or not, that work is going to happen. It's happening slower than we all would have liked just due to staffing limitations. But it's absolutely a big focus. And I appreciate Senator White's point about looking at systems, not just the individuals in systems. Oftentimes, I think we tend to say, well, what are you going to do with inequity, but it's in the system, and the system is invisible and amorphous, so And I think she's absolutely right. We are those systems. And so being able to pinpoint where the inequities arise, whether it's due to the actions of individual actors or due to the policies that we may have that are antiquated. I think Rep. Emmons mentioned that a lot of these policies and directives are quite old. And so modernizing is going to require us to add that racial equity lens into our analyses. So all of that said, I suppose the real summary of my remarks is I'm comfortable with this bill. If it doesn't pass, that's okay too, because it's going to happen one way or another. This sort of just fast tracks DOC ahead of other agencies in this work. I have enjoyed working with Heather. I've enjoyed working with the acting commissioner, and will continue to do so moving forward. So thank you all for the time.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all you're doing. And by the way, we're hopeful that as a result of our appropriations work, you will have at least one other member of your team beside yourself, so that you can actually call it a team. Because
thank you.
You do need help. I always, scratch my head when I see all the duties we're giving to you, and then I say to myself, but she's only one person. Senator Ash has joined us, and I appreciate that. He's been embroiled in tough negotiations with the other body over the budget. Did you want a few remarks about your amendment, Senator Ash?
Yeah, thank you. My amendment, I feel like, effectively mirrors what Susanna just said, which is that we established very clearly the position of Executive Director of Racial Equity within the executive branch to be the overseer and manager and coordinator of all efforts, whether it be on data collection, training, systems, and obviously that requires working in tandem with all the other departments of state government, including HR. And it is important to me that if we created that position with that intent, which partially was because we wanted expertise and not to have departments policing themselves, if you will, around these kinds of policies, because they will have their own inherent organizational biases about how they do business. We wanted someone else with a more dispassionate view overseeing and managing all that. That if we truly want to honor the intent of Act 9 when we passed it, then the executive director position must ultimately be either in a position of doing the work solely with her team or approving proposals that come from the departments themselves. So I felt like the amendment I proposed is consistent with what the House was trying to achieve, but does it in a way that doesn't actually undermine the spirit in which Act 9 was passed. And so I will also add, I took out one paragraph in the findings about human services element to some of the positions, not because that's not an important consideration. And in fact, the Urban Institute grant down at Southeast is focused largely on such a concept, but it didn't really relate to the rest of the proposal that came over from the House. And so I felt like that might actually confuse matters. And so I did want to mention that the language I present takes that finding paragraph out about human services component of the job.
Thank you for joining us on short notice. Are there any questions for Senator Ash or Rosanna Davis about this proposal?
Just like to suggest that Senator Ash get back to getting to the House and cleaning up that budget so we can get out of town tomorrow.
You can count on me for trying to reduce the number of things going in the budget.
I have some things for you. Do you want to put them in?
You might want to get them to me quickly. It's been very hard. I'll tell you, this has been very hard because emails are flying. And so unlike a normal proposal with a series of, discrete elements, but all on one page, we spent 50% of the time trying to figure out if we were all looking at the same thing. And it's been hard. So
our three of the committee members just had the experience of doing a remote conference committee on S54. We share your pain. We sympathize with you.
I also will
That's
note
a difficult experience.
I'll also note that although this is my first conference committee on the budget, it's the legislative ability to create a sense of equal proportion to differences of opinion. Compared to normal years, there's actually so much agreement between House and Senate in the budget proposal, and yet we're able to create more sense of difference, just whatever. But anyways, it's been a very rich experience.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
I'm
I'm just curious if obviously you don't have time to have a conference committee on S24. Is there a path forward for us to pass Senator Ash's amendment? Are there things that maybe highlighting the differences? Senator White,
Are you ready for any kind of I would personally concur with further proposal of concur by adopting Senator Ash's amendment.
okay.
I'm not sure that was concur with further amendment.
Well, Rebecca Wasserman
Here's
is here.
Becky.
I think there's a couple of problems with Senator Ash's amendment that need to be corrected if we're going to pass it. One being the dates. One date is December 2021, and another date is
Okay.
before it. So I think, do you want to comment on that, Becky?
Sure. So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. I was just noting that when I was sent the proposal from Senator Ash, the draft said December 15th, 21, and then the final version was January 15th, 21. So I took my best guess that the intent was the draft was December 15th, 2020, and final was January 15th, 21. And that you weren't waiting a whole year for that. So
Right.
I just wanted to confirm that that was the committee's intent.
Could we see the draft online or someplace?
Peggy,
We
can
got
you
it on
post
email
that?
last night.
We got an email last night. It's on our web. The House proposal amendment, if you look at our judiciary website.
Have that.
Okay, well, it's draft 1.1 S24 RDW 2:22 PM yesterday.
And this, the other amendment, Senate Judiciary Amendment, is that what you're talking about? That's on the website as well.
No, this one is, I just mentioned that, yeah.
Okay.
Have that one. I'm looking for Senator Ash's amendment.
Well, that is Senator Ash's. It's Committee on Judiciary to the Honorable Senate.
Okay, I'll have to find
Strike
it.
all amendment.
On your committee page, it's right underneath the House's
Right.
strike all to S24.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I have screen sharing ability, but I can bring it up if that would be helpful.
Would you like it on screen?
I think I'll have it here in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, I have it now. Thank you.
Okay. So it contains findings. It contains, I would say the biggest difference is that it puts the executive director of racial equity along with the charge to the department.
May I comment on that?
Yep.
I think it's absolutely crucial that the director of racial equity be the final, I don't know if the word is arbiter or that approve any plans, because I think Senator Ash was right when he said that departments themselves, when they look at their policies and procedures, are looking at them with non-objective eyes. And so I think that it is up to the executive director to make sure that there's an objective view and adoption of any policies and changes.
Okay. I don't know how this all gets done by tomorrow, by the way. But
I don't see how it does.
I guess we could suspend the rules today and take it up. I don't know. If
Or we
do
could
it
write a letter.
tomorrow,
Dick,
yes, Bill.
couldn't you also tomorrow, if people were in agreement on it, couldn't you do everything tomorrow, bring it off the notice calendar, bring it up and take it through all stages of passage?
Yeah, except that the House would have to concur because we're
But-
changing the House bill.
But if we messaged immediately, when do you guys meet tomorrow? Or you don't meet tomorrow?
The House? Are you talking about the
Yes.
House? We're meeting, the House meets at 10 tomorrow all day, and we don't meet until 3 this afternoon. One path forward might be if I could get my committee together quickly today to see the language, because they have not seen this. This is a total rewrite. This is basically a strike all.
Yeah.
Bill. And if they may want to weigh in on this and have some suggestions. And I could get our committee together today.
Well, we go on the floor at 1 o'clock, so we'd probably be voting on it if I can get it taken off. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, my committee may not agree to it, or they may have some suggested
Well,
language for
but
it.
here's the problem.
Right.
If your committee doesn't agree to it, it dies probably, unless
Or
we
we
agree with your
suggest-
version.
Right, or we could suggest some other language working in both our version and this strike all.
I think the main content, if I might change, and Rosanna or Becky, is that we put, this version puts the executive director of racial equity, where the report goes to, rather than the department doing its own.
That's
Yeah.
right. It changes the sort of flow of the Commissioner of Corrections has to submit the plan for approval to the Executive Director of Racial Equity, and then she submits it to the legislature. And it also changes the findings substantially to sort of recognize the role of the Executive Director of Racial Equity that was created a few years ago.
Heather or Rosanna, do you have any comments on this?
Good morning. Heather
Morning.
Simons from Corrections for the record. I do have a few comments if they're welcome. I appreciate this work.
Yeah.
I certainly appreciate all the effort that's gone into the spirit of it. I was comfortable with the original language. I still am. We've taken a considerable amount of lead, as we should, from our community stakeholders, as well as Brown and Black leaders. It's not lost on us, nothing about us without us, and it's critical that this work be done with the people that it affects, that with the communities that are leading us. I have some concerns around timelines, but it certainly isn't going to get in the way with the pace of the work that we do or the commitment that we have. The original language as well, I think, to Chair Emmons' point earlier with regards to where we are at and understanding that the opportunity we have to steer the quality of someone's sentence also includes our recognition of all of our constituents, including our constituents who we don't hear from, which are the children of incarcerated parents. And this is a commitment to the future. And the work in terms of training and building equity plans within the department really is a statement around how we're working. We can't do one thing without the other. We cannot address the workforce and not the population that we serve. We can't we can't do the work with the population we serve and the workforce without listening and partnership with the community members and the legislators. So to Director Davis' point earlier, I appreciated them. This work will get done regardless. We're already doing it. It comes with a lot of how do I say it? There's a lot of language being used to describe where we're at, what we're doing, and what the issue is. None of this will get done if we don't lean into some words like trust. Director Davis had said at a press conference a few months ago that really, and I hope I get it right, but it was not lost on me, guard down and eyes open. So though I have deep appreciation for the complexities around the proposed bill, the weight of it, the accountability, Senator White's concerns as well. This work must move, and it must work. We must move in faith, in good faith. I was comfortable with the language before, and I really would like the committee's members to hear that it will get done regardless. I hope that's helpful.
It is helpful. Thank you. Any questions for either Rosanna or Heather? Anybody on the committee? Thank you. Senator White.
Thank you. I'm sorry to speak so much, but if timing here really is a problem and we run the risk of not doing anything because, and understanding from both Heather and Susanna that, and Commissioner Baker, that this is going to go forward anyway, with or without this. If we can't go forward with a piece of legislation, although having it in session law maybe gives it more oomph. In my committee, and I know that you probably don't want to hear this, but in my committee, when there are issues that we think are important, but that don't necessarily have to have legislative oomph behind them, we've been known on a number of occasions to, as a committee, write a letter to the affected parties and tell them to do this. And it has had great impact. Things have gotten done because you have a legislative committee writing a letter to the commissioner, to the executive director of racial equity, to the administration, and to other people saying, you have to do this and this is a priority, so get it done. And putting a lot of the language from whatever would have been the legislation in that letter. So I'm just suggesting that if we can't figure out a way to move forward with a piece of legislation, that there are alternatives.
I appreciate that, but I think it would, I think it's important that we keep the three-legged stool alive of what we did with S124, S119, or what we're doing with 124 and 119, and including, and then this one. I think it's an important message to the community if we can pass S24 and figure a path forward. So anyway, that's my view. Senator Nitka.
So I just like to go back to some of the things that Commissioner Baker said, that he feels he needs the force of this bill to have a clear impact for everybody to respect. And I think that you don't get that with a letter.
Yeah.
And I think, is there not a way forward to do the
What's the matter?
Walmart.
I need to take a 2-minute break. I'm very sorry. My wife is.
So isn't there a way to go forward with just in a much shorter version to put the Office of Racial Equity at the top, to have this plan go through them before, rather than totally redoing the bill, to just put that in there somehow and make this plan that the House came forward with work. I mean, if there's a couple other statements that need to go in there, good, but it seems to me that, Commissioner Baker has worked very hard on all of this stuff. I'd like to see him get what he needs. So, any thoughts on that? Rebecca, do you see a way that something could be mirrored?
Sure. So, one suggestion would be in subsection C, and if it's helpful, I can bring it up, where the commissioner is developing a strategy and long-term plan, to have that done either in coordination or consultation with the executive director, or done together, shall develop together. So that's one area where they would be working together to do the strategy and long-term plan.
Right. I think there is sort of another message that's in there, that the Office of Racial Equity should approve the plan, which is a little bit different than just working together. I mean, working together and having that office be the ones to approve it. And there are also a couple of good things in the findings that speak to the importance of the Office of Racial Equity, and maybe just some of that be put in, and then it might be something that the House could accept more quickly than this whole change. Philip?
I just wanted to ask Representative Emmons, if I could, if we pass a version of this that's different than what the House developed, and assuming, I see Senator Ash's amendment as very, very similar to what you all did, with a few important changes. So if we go back to Jeanette's earlier sort of early motion that she could support sending Senator Ash's amendment back to you, if you could concur with that, that's obviously the easiest path. Are there things there that you think would be deal breakers for?
As I said, I'm not sure because this is so different than what the committee had worked on. I think
Is-
what Senator Nika is
I-
saying, it might be a path. I think it would be,
I
Again-
don't see it as that different, really. What strikes you as radically different from?
I think the approval process would have to be vetted with the committee.
Mhm.
That would be a different focus. And I think we also have to look at employment practices because that's really the key in terms of how people are supervised and what the culture is.
Mhm.
And DOC really needs a voice in that as well as the Racial Equity Task Force. It's just a very different angle and
Yeah.
approach. And the committee needs to come up to speed with this. I can't
Mhm.
respond in terms of how, I think need some time to think it through. And as I said earlier, I could get the committee together today for them to take a look at this draft. But I know we're in a time
Well,
crunch.
if we, and if I might, Senator Sears, I feel as though we've been put into a situation where we have it's like you volleyed the ball to us. We have one swing of the racket left. And so I think what Jeanette proposed strikes me as a very equitable compromise with what you gave us one swing at. Then we're going to adjourn this committee. And if you came back with something different tomorrow, we would realistically have to say we can't do it this session. So I don't know, it seems as though maybe you waited one step too long to get it to us for us to be able to have two swings. And that would allow your committee another version. But I could do what Jeanette proposed easily enough.
Meaning a letter? Is that what you're speaking
No,
about?
no, I'm sorry.
No.
Meaning just concurring with further proposal of amendment and having Senator Ash's be the further proposal of amendment.
I see. Okay.
Could I make a comment, Senator Sears?
You're
I
muted,
think
Dick.
he's, okay, so I will, because I don't know what he said, yes or no. So I think that
You're muted, Dick.
the main difference, if one of the main differences here that your committee needs to look at, Representative Evans, is the approval process. I think that our committee probably feels very strongly about that. The other differences in there, I don't see as being major. There are some tweaks, but I don't see them as being very different, except for that.
No.
So Senator
Dick, you're on mute.
Mute.
God, I muted myself while Walmart was on the phone from my wife's glasses.
Oh.
Those are the emergencies we deal with at
Mhm.
home. I think the best course of action is understanding that for us, the position of executive director of racial equity needs to be the person who the report goes to. I think that's critical in the so-called Ash Amendment. Other parts of it were open. So perhaps we could, if they're not major changes, we could vote this out today, this morning, have it ready for the calendar for tomorrow, whenever it gets taken up. If your committee can meet this afternoon and you could send us changes that don't involve that, seems to be the critical point. I'm trying to find it here. Because I'm not sure who's. That is the critical point for us, I would say, is that the draft plan goes to the executive director of racial Equity for review and approval. That's the critical point. If there are other tweaks that you'd like to see, you could send them to us this afternoon. We could have them sent out to committee members. They can give a thumbs up, thumbs down. And if we need to meet, we could probably pull together a meeting tomorrow morning at some point. But
So-
hopefully we don't need to. So we would report on a bill tomorrow, presumably so-called ash version 1.1 dated 9/23/20 2:22 p.m. And if you have changes to that version, I believe that's the version.
Except with Becky's change of dates.
Yeah, except with Becky's changes, yeah.
So just to be
That
clear,
would be the version.
right, so the most important piece of the Ash Amendment is at the top of page 3C, the plan, where
Yes.
DOC would submit for approval to the Executive Director of the Racial Equity, a strategy and long-term plan to address systemic racism, bias, and diversity. That's the most important piece.
Yeah, I would say so. But I think we need to keep, if we're gonna make this happen before the end of the session, we need to make any changes simple for us to understand.
Mhm. Okay,
I don't mean that we're not smart, but
no, I know what you're saying. So let me ask Representative
that
Shaw.
didn't come out right, Representative Emmons.
No, I understood. So Representative Shaw, do you think we could work through this with the committee shortly today?
Well, I'm not sure, Representative Emmons, how the committee will feel about this. This is a piece of work and to Senator Baruth that we put considerable energy into. And so I'm not sure how the committee's going to react, to be honest with you, Alice.
Well, I think it would be worth it to bring it before the committee.
Yeah, I agree.
And really work with them to understand that there's other issues at play here and other viewpoints. I think that would be important to bring that back to our committee. And see if we can find a path forward so we don't lose the whole piece. Because we do need to really help the commissioner change the culture within DOC. And it's not going to happen overnight. And we need to take the first step to really do that. So I can get my committee. I mean, I think that's a good plan, what Senator Sears put out. If you can put out the language. And then I can get our committee to meet today and submit some language back. And then you've got it there for your calendar in the morning.
Yeah, again, I would hate to see wholesale changes that make it difficult for us to agree to on the fly, because that's the way it's going to have to be.
Right. I think we both feel that way.
Yeah. So if it's, is that amenable to the committee, to the Senate Judiciary Committee?
There's really not much choice, so.
Not at this late date. You know, and Representative Emmons did share with me the initial drafts. I did share them with Senator Ash, and he and I talked about it, and he went over this and came up with this, but it didn't pass the House until yesterday. Normally, you know,
Right.
or
Right.
was it yesterday, or was it, am I right?
Tuesday, wasn't it Tuesday?
Tuesday. Well,
Tuesday.
today's Thursday.
Thursday. It was Tuesday.
Yeah, it didn't get referred to us till yesterday.
Yeah.
And we're also dealing with S-119 as well. So I think that's the best we can do. Hopefully we can get a bill through. If we can't agree on it, then Senator White's original proposal would be working.
Senator White's proposal, what? I just
The
want.
letter, the
Oh, the
letter
letter. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm just,
that we could send under the auspices of perhaps the Joint Justice Oversight Committee.
okay.
That's
I'm hoping we can find a path to work for.
I think we can. Senator, Representative Shaw?
Thank you, Senator. I was wondering if you're going to make any changes to the Ash Amendment before you send it over to us?
Only if you want them.
Pardon me?
I'm not, yeah, Becky's gonna make the dates correct. And there was one other, right? One other.
I think it was just, I just wanted I had a question about it's the same language that was in the House version about the plan addressing, let me just bring it up, systemic, where's it? Address systemic racism, bias, and diversity and inclusion. As the editors were looking at it again, they just wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to say systemic racism, bias, and promote diversity and inclusion. I don't know. I think the meaning is clear here, but I wanted to just run that by the committee to make sure that that was not a change that they wanted to make.
Just curious, so we can figure out when the committee can meet.
Right.
And not have to meet.
So Representative Shaw,
Yes.
did you have other changes that you were, because you asked Senator Sears if we were going to make changes to the Ash Amendment. Were there other issues in there that you saw?
I can't say so anything yet, Senator White, because I really haven't had a chance to really sit down and run the Ash Amendment through my brain yet, but I will.
Okay. Okay.
Did Becky get her answer?
Yeah, I don't know. Can you explain that one again, please?
Sure. So right now,
where are you in the bill?
So do you want me to go through Ash Amendment? Okay. So in the Ash Amendment, it is subsection C on page 3. So it says the Commissioner of Corrections shall submit for approval to the Executive Director of Racial Equity a strategy and long-term plan to address systemic racism, bias, and diversity and inclusion in the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, the editors think it should. What is
they just their question was whether sort of systemic was meant to be modifying anything other than racism, and perhaps they had a suggestion of clarifying to address systemic racism, bias, and promote diversity and inclusion. I think
actually, I think that does help, because that is what you're trying to do. Any objection from anyone?
Sounds fine.
Including the representatives?
No, it sounds fine.
And then
I think that helping and promoting diversity and inclusion is much better.
And then the last point I wanted to make is that I have to check with the Senate Secretary's office about whether, just thinking about this, since this was already passed by the Senate and it was referred back to the Senate, I think it has to be a further proposal of amendment that comes from either one senator, or it could be from each senator individually on the committee. But I just want to double check that. If it's the case, should I have it from every senator on the committee?
Yes, unless there's a committee member who objects. I would report it, but
okay.
So Becky, how many times have we amended this? So the bill came over to our house and it was not amended, I believe.
It was not, no, it was a Senate bill that passed out of the Senate, came to the House. Your committee amended it and it passed out of the House. And then in the Senate, it was referred to Senate Judiciary, which is, I think that's the one thing that's confusing me a little, is because it was referred back to a different committee than originally had jurisdiction over it. So I just want to double check with the Senate Secretary's office. if it is a further proposal of amendment or a committee
I
amendment.
believe that you're correct, that it is a concur with further proposal
Okay.
amendment.
So I just
I
have to
believe
change
that's the way it would
yeah.
be. I think it's no different than, because it's already passed the Senate in one manner and it's already passed the House in a different, and now we're concurring with further proposal amendment.
So if we submit some changes that we all agree to, then you would
Well, we
change
would just
what's
change it tomorrow morning, I guess.
right in the calendar. Okay. Okay, just want to get it
But
clear.
can we check to make sure with Secretary Bloomer that we can do that? Because I don't want to, that we can change it tomorrow morning if we need to.
So you'll vote it out now.
We'll vote it out right now.
Okay.
Then we will use that crazy process to send it to him. I believe it's a concur with further proposal amendment, but then can we change our amendment on the fly tomorrow morning?
Don't people often, you have a substitute amendment for the one that's in the calendar?
Yeah, I think you can.
I'll connect with him to get the process for how that could happen.
Okay.
If I can ask Becky a question, I'm trying to get my committee to meet either around 12:30 or 1 o'clock. None of the members know about this yet. Becky, when would you have the language ready to present to us available?
I could have it by that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right. Is there any, so I believe what's Senate, somebody moved that we report as amended draft 1.1, which would now be 1.2 or 2.1.
I'll change it to 1.2.
Okay, so draft 1.2 of S-124 that we concur, that we concur with further proposal amendment, and that is seen in draft 1.2 of S-24. Is there any further discussion? And any of the witnesses who are with us on Zoom are welcome to comment, including Representative Emmons, Representative Shaw, Heather Simmons, or Rosanna Davis. Any committee thoughts? Okay. Peggy, would you please call the roll? Because I think this is our only vote.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Benning,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes. So, all of our names would go on it if it's not a concur with further proposal amendment, then the committee vote was 5-0-0. All right. Again, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Committee, if you could hang on.
Peggy, if we could hang on as a committee, Peggy, after we bounce out of being live on the air.
Sure. Let me know when to end the live.
I think we're adjourning the meeting now. Thank you.